welcome to this episode of The Daily. My name is Brendan Malone. While reading the newspaper the other day, it looks like Britain is possibly about to field 2 transgendered athletes to compete at the upcoming Olympics. What this means is you'll have 2 men who identify as women who are going to compete against other women in the women's Olympic field. Now, this may or may not take place depending on, as I understand, how the selection process actually goes. But what's interesting about this, and the reason they can do this is because the Olympic Committee now is allowing people who identify as the opposite gender to compete anywhere they want. As I understand it, one of the stipulations is, so it's just a matter of identifying as the other gender. One of the stipulations that's on it, though, apparently is that you have to, if you're a male, you have to have been taking testosterone-lowering medications for at least a year. Now, this whole thing is extremely interesting. It's actually quite absurd when you think about it, and I'll talk about the 2 major and glaring absurdities here. First of all, when you've got a field now where you've got males who are competing against females, even if those males have been taking testosterone-lowering medications, you still have a problem. Males are physically superior to women. They just are. It's the general norm. That's how it works. There are some exceptions, but the general norm is males enjoy physical superiority over women for several different reasons, okay? Strength, agility, muscle mass. And what that means is you've now got a playing field that's not particularly level. And what it does is it casts serious doubt about the accuracy and the validity of Olympic medals and how accurate they are as a measure of success and achievement and actual ability going forward. Because, for example, if you're a female athlete and you get beaten by men who identify as women, does that really mean that you are the 2nd or 3rd best female athlete in the world? Or does it actually mean that you're really number 1, but because you were placed in an unfair field where you were competing against other athletes with a major strength advantage that shouldn't be present in your field, that you've been robbed of your number 1 title? And if you're a female athlete and you are competing and you are beating other male competitors in that field, does that mean that those male competitors are actually number 2 in the world in women's sports, whatever it is that they're competing against, or number 3? Or does it actually mean that other female athletes are actually number 2 and 3 and that they've been robbed of their places or their chance to even compete and to measure themselves, or maybe there are other athletes who actually would be better than you. But because of this sort of absurd ruling that allows men now to compete in women's events, that's all been thrown into disarray. The second way that this decision from the Olympic Committee is absurd is this. The whole notion that this ruling is built on is this idea that gender is nothing more than a subjective construct that sort of exists in your mind. If you think you're a female, that's good enough for them. Right? So if you identify as a female, that's all it takes. But here's the thing. If all it takes is to identify as a female, and that's what makes you a female, why does the Olympic Committee have a rule that requires men to take testosterone-reducing medications for at least a year? The only reason you need to do that is because there are actually very real biological differences between the sexes, male and female, and that male and female isn't just something that exists in your mind, that male and female are physical realities that have real physical properties that are very different to each other. See, you wouldn't need that ruling if there was no difference. If it was just in your mind, you'd say, okay, great, there's not going to be an issue here. We don't even need to worry about telling these newfound men who think they're all women to actually take testosterone-lowering medications, because there's not going to be any issue here. They thought they're women. That's good enough for us. That means they're really women. And you'll have a level playing field, because all it takes is people thinking they're something in order to be that thing. The other thing that I think is really interesting here is I wonder how many athletes we're going to see going the other way. I wouldn't be surprised to see more men who actually start competing in the women's arena than women who start identifying as men and trying to compete against men. Because there's just no way that that's ever going to be a level playing field. A woman who identifies as a man is just not going to have the muscle mass, the strength, the speed, everything else she needs to compete in a field with men. She's just not going to. And no one likes to be in a situation where you're just getting pummeled and beaten and it's just, you're on a sort of a pointless sort of losing track the whole time. However, men going the other way into the female arena are going to have a physical advantage, and it's almost certainly going to stroke your ego if you can go into that arena and you can win when perhaps you couldn't win against other men, to have men who are naturally going to want, I think you're going to see more men naturally trying that on. Now, I don't mean they're necessarily just pretending, but I think that you will see, because of the fact that, you're more likely to get a win out of it, you will see more men who identify as women trying to compete than you will women going the other way. I think the other thing too that's extremely interesting is here is to see how certain countries, which have a bit of a propensity already for bending the rules, shall we say, are going to handle these issues. I would not be surprised at all to see countries like China and others fielding athletes who are male in the female arena and putting those male athletes on testosterone blockers in order to allow them to compete in those female fields, in order to take home even more medals for their country and even more glory, which, from a propaganda perspective looks pretty good. So it'll be very, very interesting to see how this all shapes up. Thanks for watching. I'll see you tomorrow on The Daily.